Okay, and we're back from the break in Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs. We have Representative Kelly Payala in the witness chair, and we're grateful to have you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for inviting me to testify today. And thank you, the committee members. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to apologize if I get emotional at all during this testimony. It's
we're grateful you're here.
It's
still fresh.
Right. It is.
And you know that,
right.
Yeah.
Yes, but I just wanted to say that in the beginning. So the towns that I represent in the House are Londonderry, Weston, Andover, and Winhall, all of which experienced some degree of flooding in the July 10th event. And then my day job, if you don't know, is I'm the town clerk in Londonderry. So, my day started with a text from the select board chair saying, town is flooding, we need the key to the town office to get in so that we have access to computers and radios and all of the information that we need. So that's what woke me up on the morning of the 10th. And by the time I was out of bed and at my front door, which was in moments from that text, I stepped out to see that there was water already halfway up the tires of my car that was parked right outside of our apartment. And I had received the emails the night before saying that there was going to be flooding, as we all did, but had no idea that where I was going to be impacted. So rather than getting the key to the town office to the select board chair, I and the other 5 households that are in the immediate vicinity of where I live were all being evacuated from our houses and trying to get our vehicles out of the water as quickly as possible. My 15-year-old son was home with me that morning. My other older son was away, which was a blessing. And so he and I, again, in a matter of minutes, grabbed a change of clothes, grabbed our 2 cats, their food and a litter box, threw them into the car, and drove away before the water was so high that we couldn't move the vehicle. And it would have been a matter of minutes before it would have been too late to get the car out. We immediately went to around the corner, which is on higher ground, and found a place that we and the cats could be. There was also a shelter set up in a church that is on that higher portion of the South Village. So we spent some time in that shelter during the day. Where we ended up being stuck while the flooding event was going on was at a friend's house. They were out of town and they heard what was happening, and I had people reach out to them and they said, sure, use our house as home base, no problem. We ended up staying there for almost 3 months because they were away. But during the day, where we were was sort of an island. And the town of Londonderry has the West River flowing through the entire town. It goes through the middle of both of our villages. We have 2 of them, referred to as the North and the South Village. And so where I was trapped between the flooding that was happening in the North Village and the flooding that was happening in the South Village. My son and I spent the entire day going between the 2 villages and watching the water rise and asking other people who were also trapped what they needed. There's a restaurant that was in the area that we were stuck in, and they told everyone that was nearby that they could come and have dinner there, so they provided a space for everyone to be and meals for everyone, including the town road crew who were trapped at the town garage. The town office also gets isolated during flooding events because of its location and the flooding that happens in the South Village. So on the plus side of that day, and lessons learned from Irene, is that our volunteer fire and rescue people know that when flooding happens, all of our fire and ambulance equipment needs to be moved out of their stations and spread around town so that kind of every area of town has something available to it, including people. So they had done that the night before, which is a really good lesson learned.
We were hearing about that in Ludlow.
Yeah,
That they lost access to the park.
right. And you know, that's a lesson learned the hard way.
Yeah, right. Right.
And we were fortunate that they did all of that the night before and a little bit the morning of, before the water got too high. So, you know, we have come far. We just haven't done some of the in-depth, harder work to protect our villages and the people in them. So the rest of my personal story is we lived on couches for a couple of months. My landlord worked diligently to get the place that we had been flooded out of repaired so we could move back in, which we did because I really couldn't find any other viable, affordable places to go that would accept animals, that, you know, I mean, I have 2 children and 2 cats, and you know, I can't live in a 1-bedroom apartment or studio, and Airbnbs are not a viable option given the public servant's salary that I live on. So we moved back in, which didn't do much to alleviate our family's overall stress. Both of my children started taking antidepressants shortly after the flood. Both of our cats ended up being on antidepressants after the floods. I took them for a time. We all have found therapists, which was a whole other, we could go down a mental health rabbit hole, talking about the lack of accessibility and affordability, and that was a whole other realm of stressful things. But the snowball effect of having gone through the trauma of the day continues. I mean, it has gotten better. You know, we're all growing and learning, and but for months it sort of permeated everything that was happening. One of the offshoots of that was continuing to live in the place that we had experienced being flooded. It pretty quickly became clear after the first large rain event that happened after we had moved back in that there was just no way that we could continue to live there and move on with life. And for me personally, I was like, I have too much to do to be derailed by the sound of rain. You know, I have to be able to sleep at night. I have to know that my family is safe. You know, we finding another place to live became a driving force. So fortunately, we moved into another apartment over Thanksgiving, and we're now in a place that is on higher ground and further away from the river, which in the December flooding event made all the difference in the world for me personally, because I could focus on the job I needed to do and not worry about my children and my home and my animals, and which is part of the reason that when I look at my communities, I think what we need to focus on is moving our villages, our homes, our people away from areas that are just going to cause repeated trauma. Not only financial, you know, economic, but also, you know, like the community trauma that has now been experienced twice in a little over 10 years between Irene and the July flooding is significant. And if all we're doing is spending our time rebuilding from disaster, we are never moving forward. We are not going to be a thriving community. We're always going to be on the defensive and playing catch up. And so, as immediately as my sort of damaged brain would let me, what I have wanted to pivot to and focus on and try to help the communities that I represent think about is how can we look at the challenge of water and the rivers that we live on regionally, because what one town does is going to affect whoever is downstream. And the headwaters of the West River are in Weston, and so they're immediately impacted. We are immediately downstream from them, and then the Ball Mountain Dam and Townsend Dam are immediately downstream from us. So in a very short geographic, distance, there's a lot of water that happens really, really quickly. And where can we put water that isn't our villages? And if the water is going to be in our villages, how do we harden that infrastructure, or find places that are out of harm's way that we can designate as development zones? And that requires a lot of data gathering. And I think one of the things that everyone is screaming for is help us gather the data. We don't know. As lay people, we don't know how the water behaves. We don't know where the water goes. We don't know where the areas are that we should be moving away from or moving to. And so how do we help our municipalities and our property owners get the data to use to make educated and economically responsible decisions? Because continuing to throw money at rebuilding in places that we know are going to end up surrounded by 7 feet of water doesn't seem like the best use of anyone's time and energy or money. And from what I have heard, there are a lot of people who really want to do that work, and they really are digging in and wanting to, like, what studies do we have to do? Where are we going to find the money to pay for that? How can we work together so that what we're doing isn't damaging another community downstream? And they just don't know where to turn.
Yeah.
And they don't know what the pots of money are, because there are a lot of them, but they're kind of disparate and they do different things. And you have to have the professional expertise in your community somewhere, somehow, to do all of that. And many small municipalities just don't. I know in Londonderry, one of the things that happened fairly immediately, within days of the flooding, is the select board started talking about hiring someone to come in and do all of the paperwork that needed to go into filing with FEMA for the municipal infrastructure repairs, which is now, I think, a little over $800,000. And that's just the, road, that's pretty much just roads and culverts. And that's a good investment, because with that much damage, if we're not going to get reimbursed for it, that puts a small town really behind the 8 ball in terms of their budget and taxing capacity for other things. But many small towns either can't find a person to fill that role, or don't feel that they have the capacity to pay for that additional human power to do the work that really needs to be done. And that's just to tackle the rebuilding and the immediate recovery. This person is not likely to stay on to do the, let's say, 5 years worth of mitigation work that probably needs to happen. And one of the things that keeps pointing me to looking at things regionally is that issue of sort of limited human capacity and financial capacity. And if we can get towns to work together and people in the community to work together, whether it's not-for-profits or businesses, or, form the committee and pull everybody in, and we can give resources to someone who's helping from a more regional approach, I think that gets us more bang for our buck, both from, the solutions being helpful across town lines, and the fact that, each little town can't hire a full-time, you know, person. And I don't think that we'll find that we have that many people to be hired, especially those with expertise, you know, working in the field. It also makes me wonder if our state agencies are going to be staffed adequately to do the amount of work that they will likely need to do to be partnering and working, you know, being the go-between between towns and FEMA for things that are able to get federal funding, which is I'm anxious to see the BAA.
Yeah, and not just the funding, but the work, the staff in A&R to do the work of, now that we have this flood map, what additionally that they finished the flood map, and Kelly and I have been meeting on a regular basis, I feel like, with the Weston group also.
Yes.
I mean, with these new maps, we also need to start and make sure there's enough staff to do the planning for mitigation in every one of these river corridors. Like, we need a mitigation plan for every one of them, and do we have the staff to do that?
Right.
And we can't necessarily outsource that.
Right. We can't. And we shouldn't.
Yeah.
But I think there are gaps at all levels,
Yes.
you know, so.
But on this one particular one, we have a very good woman, Marie Caduto, who is in charge of our Basin 10, all the rivers in Basin 10, and the West Rivers in her, as is the Black River, right, in Ludlow. And those, you know, we would love to see them have the staff and come back to it, you know. And I know there are some mitigation plans, and that's why it could be curious to get the director of Vermont Emergency Management in, because I know I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I believe there is some of this in process, but so I was encouraged when I wanted to do this bill on establishing a flood mitigation plan for every river corridor. Michael Grady said, you know, it already exists. We have this in other places,
right.
So we need to
find
what it is and where it is.
Yeah. Right.
And pull
it's everywhere.
Right.
And pulling it all together in a way that's digestible.
Right.
Yeah, and accessible,
and
for municipal government.
It took me 2 weeks.
Volunteer select board, it's not.
Yeah.
Right.
Most don't even have a manager at that time.
Right.
No, Al's session, it took me 2 weeks. I kept asking, who's in charge of the flood maps? Like, who's in charge of updating them? Finally, we found, you know, the woman who runs the NFIP program for the state, who's wonderful, but she was hidden. Nobody wanted to say.
Right. Right. And so pulling it all together for people is something we really need to help with.
Yeah. Well, Representative Piola, before you moved on from your personal story, I just wanted to thank you for being really brave and sharing a lot of hard stuff. You know, it really does help ground us in, you know, the ongoing reality for people and how we really have to be there as partners.
And, you know, I know the challenge of the businesses that were flooded and the length of time it took them to repair and reopen, and some haven't yet. And some, you know, I know the Weston Playhouse, there is like long-term.
We're hearing from Suzanne next week.
You know, but that is
tomorrow. Tomorrow.
Like, we need to know what the plan is before we invest a lot of capital in, and it's a lot for people to wrap their heads around. And when you're focused on simply having your doors open, having the headspace to then think about, well, maybe I need to raise my building up, which is an expensive, time-consuming endeavor, and is costly to the business. I know that there is money from FEMA, and then there's money from the state, but those individual property owners are still expected to contribute financially, and for some people, that alone could be the make or break part of the decision.
Yeah.
And because a lot of our small businesses in the village also have housing above them, if we lose those businesses in that location, we're not only having to find another spot for economic activity, but we're also going to need to address the loss of housing that goes along with that, which is also a part of the economy that is, we're all well aware of the challenges that we're already facing with that. But to lose more housing because of the fact that buildings are in the floodplain is just gonna compound the issue. But, but if we don't do anything, we're saying to people who are living there, like, well, you're just gonna go through that again.
Right.
And it's, we're at the housing crunch that is everywhere. It was really hard to find another place to live in general.
Yeah, I hadn't realized you'd moved, because when I last saw you, I know.
Yeah. So, but the opportunity was there, and I was like, yes, I'll move again if it means that I'm in a safer spot that will remain dry, and I don't have to worry about that. Another thing that came from like the personal struggles was flood insurance.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
Which is
still
something-
want to talk about it in finance.
We just gotta find somebody that knows something.
I know, that's
Yeah.
true. That's true.
And it's really kind of complicated, even, I didn't have flood insurance. I did have renter's insurance, which was not helpful at all.
You're kidding.
Didn't cover anything.
didn't
Nothing.
cover
Didn't cover
anything.
anything.
Not if you
Nothing.
wanted.
Not a penny from renter's insurance, but didn't have flood insurance. And so I did get from FEMA the housing assistance, which was $2,300, I think, and then there was $700 for emergency supplies for being displaced, whatever, and that was it.
Did your landlord have flood insurance?
He did not.
And I remember you had a story about, because he did a good job as a landlord, he almost was penalized by FEMA.
Well, so he didn't get any money from FEMA. He
Yeah.
applied, and he didn't have flood insurance on the building,
Oh,
but because it's a commercial building, because he's a landlord, and it's a commercial building, they didn't deny him, they closed his claim.
that's interesting.
It was.
So I understand that if that happens, they should reapply, that there is this multiple, you have to just keep doing it. But also there's the tie that if you accept and keep going, you have to buy into the flood insurance.
Well,
I mean,
and I think because of all of those caveats, he didn't pursue
yes,
going any further. And so by my accepting funds from FEMA, I then had to buy flood insurance when I moved back into the place that had been flooded, which was a little over $800. So when you're a renter moving in and you're paying first, last security, if you also have to buy a flood insurance policy, that's essentially 4 months rent.
And there's a substantial amount of a deductible, is there not, with the
Yes.
insurance that you had to buy?
Yes.
As a percentage, do you know what that was?
I don't recall off the top of my head. And I was only insuring the contents of the building, so it was really just based on, my belongings and what that
That
number
sounds very
was.
My experience in
reasonable.
dealing with flood insurance in the past has been that it will cover you for flood, typically at a very substantial discount. I ran into discounts myself. I've had a couple flood claims of properties I've owned in other states, and it's been 20 to 25%, 20% discount offhand or deductible to begin with. And it covers flood and flood only, and often when you have an event, it's flood, it's windstorm, it's other
it's
kinds of
multiple
things.
disasters.
And so you have to have multiple kinds
Right,
of
of
insurance. but
insurance.
Flood insurance is very, very limited.
Yes,
If the wind blows the roof off your house and lets the water in,
Right.
then you're covered with household.
right.
The church in Montpelier on Barry Street, the water flooded their basement, but it came up through the city drains, because the city drains backed up. So their flood insurance covered them. The other places that had the water just come in, your insurance doesn't cover. So it's,
Yeah, it's complicated.
It should cover all water.
Complicated.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
just like,
Yeah.
it also didn't, I had to pay for a full year upfront,
Mhm.
and then it didn't go into effect for 30 days.
And then you
great.
weren't there for a year either, right?
Right.
And
And
then
then
she
when
went-
I moved and I
You
left,
didn't get it.
and I got in touch with my insurance company and said, okay, I've moved, I no longer live there, I don't, I need to move my renter's insurance to the new location, but I don't need to move the flood insurance to the new location. And she said, okay, I need a letter saying when you moved out, and then we can cancel it. So I sent a letter, very simply saying that we had moved out and the date that we were out 100%, and that was denied because it didn't say that I had removed the contents of the apartment when I moved out.
Oh, I left all
How
my
would
things
you
there.
even-
I left all my
Why
things
would
in
you
that
even
old
say that?
apartment.
So I
So
sent,
you
so I
sent
sent another
another
letter.
letter.
Right,
And
but you're a
that was
clerk and a
accepted.
legislator,
Right.
you know, like, you know how to write a letter. This is- it's
Right,
frustrating.
but
Yeah.
also, it's now, a month and a half
Right,
later
right.
that
This is
I'm
again the
finally
carrying
being
cost.
told
Carrying costs.
what I need to say in order
Mhm.
to do what I need to do.
Right.
And so the whole experience was just,
Enraging.
yeah, and you're dealing with an insurance agent and a professional, and
Mhm.
it's not that they don't know what they're doing, it's that the communication that she was getting from right.
Mhm.
Well, the delay is typical though, in having a 30-day wait before you can buy flood insurance. Because otherwise, what people do is they wait until they know there's gonna be a flooding event, and then they go buy insurance.
Right. And so I understand it from that perspective, but I was like, do I not move back in for 30 days? And continue couch surfing for 30 days while I, wait for it to be in effect? Because it's not like I thought we were going to have another massive flood event, but
You can't rule it out.
yeah.
Wow.
So, the other part of that was the apartment that I was living in, which is close to the river. The front couple of feet of the building are in the special hazard flood zone. The rest of it is not. And, which I didn't know until after the flood.
Right.
And I started reading all of the things that FEMA was sending me about, accepting money from them and flood insurance. And I was like, well, I want to make sure I'm informed. And I was like, I wish that I had known this when we moved in initially. And I probably would have thought differently about making sure I had flood insurance
Right.
from the beginning.
Of course you would have.
But,
Were you there for Irene?
I mean, I lived in town, but I wasn't,
You weren't. there.
where I was living was not impacted.
Right.
My house wasn't impacted.
And was that building impacted in Irene?
So I remember asking my landlord about that when I was moving in.
Yeah.
And I don't recall exactly what his answer was, but whatever it was, it didn't raise enough concern with me to think that I needed that level of protection to be living there. For what that's worth. And so that being required to be disclosed, whether it's to a renter or in a real estate sale transaction,
That's a
would be
piece of
helpful.
awareness, of course, disclosure of that.
I think House General was gonna take it up.
I
Yeah.
think so.
And there's thorny issues to
Oh, sure.
get to their, so I want to.
Right, not simple. I realize that's not a simple request.
Right, yeah.
But even knowing where the lines on the FEMA floodplain
Mhm.
map are,
Right. Right.
Well,
Be helpful.
and that map is old and,
I know,
and
outdated.
useless, so
Right.
until it's updated.
but FEMA is still gonna use that map regardless of how
Yes,
old and
that's what-
outdated
yeah,
it is.
That's what's so
To
frustrating.
make
Right.
determinations about,
Yes.
someone's eligibility for assistance.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you for,
Yeah, I don't want to end on that note particular, and we're in touch. We said to Representative Boyden as well, we want this flood bill we're hearing about and the pieces that make it over to work for all of our communities. So, definitely stay in touch. I don't know, is that something you're going to sign on to? Do you feel good about its
Yeah.
provisions?
yeah,
Okay.
I think generally, I I think anything that we can do
Right.
is
Going to be helpful.
going to be helpful and is going to be necessary.
Mm-hmm.
We can't continue to do nothing.
Yeah,
Rebuilding the same way is
right. And I would like to add Kelly to the list of suggestions for our joint hearing with natural resources. If you're okay with that.
I think so.
You can give them what for in that
Yeah.
committee.
Yeah.
We're like the choir here. We really need someone to hear this. And we understand you'll probably be back tomorrow when our Weston.
Yeah, I'll probably be in the,
Are they
to
coming in
hear
person?
from Weston and Londonderry.
I don't know, Suzanne
Okay.
and Jim are both coming.
They're gonna be on Zoom.
Yes.
Regardless,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
still wanna be.
And I
here?
think Londonderry people are gonna be on Zoom.
Okay, I will
Yeah.
point you out. I will
Yeah.
make sure they know you're in the room.
Yeah.
Lots of things.
And, but I keep pushing them to communicate with each other and work together, and I sure hope that at the end of the work that we do, that we can offer them some assistance.
I think that's the one silver lining to end on, is we're all working more closely together. I think all the communities realize this is a problem we need to solve together.
Yes, agreed.
Thanks so much, Representative
Thank you.
Ayala.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm sure I will see you again.
Yes.
We'll see you at 2.
Yeah, actually.
See you shortly.
Nicole, thank you so much for being here. Of course. Is this the first time you've come to testify in the legislature?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it helpful if we introduce ourselves and and tell you how this sort of works? Do you want to start?
I'm Ann Cummings. I represent Washington District, which is mostly Washington County. I chair finance and I sit on this committee in the morning.
Allison Clarkson, Windsor County Majority Leader, this committee, and GovOps. And take it away.
Okay. Keisha Ram Hinsdale, I chair this committee. And I serve from Chittenden County. Where are you based?
I'm in Moortown, so I'm in Washington County.
You're, okay,
Matter
so
of-
it's a
Down the road. I
constituent.
drove through there the day after the December.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
I'm Randy Brock from Franklin County and part of Grand Isle County, and I'm the Senate Minority Leader.
Wendy Harrison. I live in Brattleboro and represent Wyndham County. And I'm also on the institutions committee, where we'll be looking at damages to wastewater treatment plants and water plants.
So what we'd ask of you is to state your name and any affiliation that you feel is relevant or that you want to share. And then, tell your story. This chain of folks thought it was compelling. So I hope you feel, not intimidated to be here.
I'm happy to share my experience. It's sort of a complex compound issue.
Yeah.
But my name is Nicole Malone, and I live in Moortown. I'm a librarian in town. I'm also a community organizer and artist.
You're a librarian.
Yeah, so I've been living in this area for 3 years. I came from central Massachusetts. And so yeah, I've been renting an apartment in Moortown Village, which I think that property I'm on is actually the lowest point in the village. This building did flood in Irene, so I'm gonna give a little background. I've been there for 3 years, and there has been at least 2.5 of those years have been a struggle with our landlord. He is textbook slumlord. He has taken advantage of us as well as many other people. He does not upkeep the building.
How many units?
There are 6 units, 4 of which are occupied right now, and it's condemnable in every sense. There's rats, there's mold, there's leaks, there's drafts, there's multiple infestations of all kinds. Structural integrity is questionable. It flooded to the 2nd floor in Irene.
You're back on, I don't know if that's north or south. If I'm going through Moortown, you're on the left-hand side.
If you're going south on 100B through the village, we're on the right across from St. Patrick's Church, but
Oh,
2
yeah.
houses down from the fire department. It's a
Right.
big building and it looks awful.
Okay.
So I've gone to great lengths to find justice for myself and my fellow tenants. We've involved the town. The town has taken our landlord to court a year ago. He's in contempt of court right now for a year. Nothing.
Right.
So I've been seeking every avenue of support, assistance. We've received nothing. I've gone to the end of VT Legal Aid, I've reached out to Capstone, I've reached out to community funds. We have seen nothing. We haven't gotten any relief in terms of, financial relief to move, or to even address things like, we didn't have running water all week. And so
And you've been advised to keep paying your rent, is that?
I withhold my rent.
Okay, I didn't mean to put you on the
No,
spot, but
no,
I wouldn't pay rent, I don't know.
I withhold my rent. I'm still putting in a savings account.
Mhm.
So I don't touch it.
Yeah,
Which is,
right,
I'm
right.
already
That's smart.
overpaying.
Mhm.
It's getting more and more difficult. I actually haven't been able to pay into it for a couple months. But it's been a year of this.
Is this a resident of Vermont, the landlord?
Yeah, he lives across the street in a dilapidated mansion. The Ward family mansion is where he lives, and he has multiple properties, not only in the village, but in town and all over central Vermont. He owns a lot of property. And he's very unwell. He's older, he's unwell mentally, emotionally. He's unwilling to accept help or even he hasn't spoken to me in 18 months. The last time I saw him was in court when he was throwing a bunch of accusations at me. I mean, in his eyes, I'm the problem, not the fact that he has responsibility.
Right.
Are there other children managing his property or anybody else?
No, he doesn't have any children or family. He has one gentleman who's a handyman, but he is not any better in terms of communication or competency. So incredibly frustrating.
Yeah.
There's very vulnerable people in this building. There's children in this building. And it's very psychologically a lot to deal with. There's nowhere else to go. If we had somewhere else to go, we would go there.
Right.
We're all low income. We're postal workers, librarians, service workers, elderly folk, laborers. I mean, and you just see people cycle through his buildings like this. And he takes your first class security. You never get that back. He, tries to evict you without going through the proper legal avenues. Anyway, it's a whole big mess.
He sounds super challenged.
Yeah.
And you're challenged, but he also sounds.
Well, and that's the thing. So all the assistance was required to go through him. Like we can't apply for grants to address the fact that our roof leaks. We can't, I can't even get my rental rebate because he won't even acknowledge that he rents to me.
Yeah.
So there's a whole mess of things happening. So the flood, I don't know, like this. So the whole thing with they flooded in Irene. As far as I understand, he accepted FEMA money, but did not use it. He pretty much left the building as it was. And then continued to rent it for 10, 11 years. And so recently it just flooded again in the December flood. Our whole basement filled up to the ceiling. We personally had to pump it. We're paying, the tenants are splitting all the electrical bills. But what happened was, all the electricals were flooded. They turned the power off, so we didn't have power. The power got turned back on miraculously without an inspection, which is probably not good. Big risk for electrical fire. I mean, I have photos of the condition of the basement where I'd be happy to show you.
Okay, you're painting a pretty vivid picture.
The water pump failed last week, so we didn't have running water. Someone under the cover of darkness went in and messed with something, so it's back on, but it's sort of on and off. And supposedly, it's a small town, there's people that know what's,
But this is health stuff.
It's
You
health
have to
stuff,
have
and it's
running
not-
The Department of
water.
Health hasn't shut him down or done anything.
well, so the basement is, so the water is back on, however, there's a hole blown through the bulkhead, so the pipes will freeze. All the insulation is in puddles on the floor. There's gaping holes in the basement. You can see jacks that are actually holding up the main structural posts that are falling. Like, it's a nightmare. It's very unsafe. The health officer in our town has been aware of it. He's been working on this case for 2 years. However, it's a delicate situation where there's potentially 7 people that would be immediately homeless if we condemn this building. So they've been trying to coerce him to do what he has to do. So, and this is a select board. It's taking eons to get anything done unless I'm showing up to every meeting. And every time I show up I don't have the resources or time to take all this on or represent myself in court. But every time I do, I generally receive a lot of backlash or retaliation from the landlord's handyman. Like he'll intimidate me, he'll stand outside my door, he'll text me crazy things. Yeah. So unsafe in a lot of ways, which is psychologically a lot
Yeah.
to handle. And so the health officer,
Vermont Legal Aid.
I've gone to the end of Vermont Legal Aid. I got to a point where they said, all you can do is sue him, and we can't help you with that.
And
So
he's
that's-
already in violation.
Well, so that's
before.
why I went to my town, and they
Yeah.
said, y'all have a responsibility
Right.
to either address this
Yeah.
or do what you gotta do to run this place, which ideally let's not do that. So
Mhm.
we all work together in the court order. There is a clause, which is what we're trying, this is what would love to see happen, is written into the court order. There is a segment that says if tenants are displaced due to work that needs to be done to
Mhm.
remedy situations and the violations, we would all our, the relocation fees and
Yeah,
housing would be the responsibility of the landlord.
absolutely.
However, until we go and find, and get the court to trigger those fines, I think there's
Right.
already 200 grand. He's
Yeah.
been getting fined $500 a day for
Yeah.
a year. Unless that happens,
Right,
you know, it will just get condemned and then we'll effectively be homeless without any relief
right.
or means to house ourselves, in any meaningful
I
way.
mean, housing in central Vermont is,
There's none.
yeah,
And we can't afford it. I can't afford
Mhm.
$1,500 a month
And
for
then
a
you're gonna
studio
have-
apartment.
and then you're gonna go somewhere else, and you'll have to drive to work, and,
Which at that point, I would not be worth making that commute. And there's one of the people, there's a local postal worker, another one is a local voting, they work in voting. The other woman is older, and she has worked a lot in her life, and she's currently very ill. She's been sick for a month. She's on the first floor, she lives right above where all the mold is. She's just been she's very unwell. She
Yeah.
hasn't had heat for 5 years,
Yeah.
or hot water. She showers in my apartment.
Oh, my God.
Wow.
that's illegal.
Oh my gosh,
I
that
know.
is illegal.
Oh, this is why I'm very frustrated, because we've been to the.
And this isn't, this is a
Yeah.
civil, not a criminal,
Right,
unless somebody
right.
dies. But, yeah, you're just caught between a rock and a hard place.
I think it's criminal at this
I would
point.
say it's
Well,
Yeah, I
at this
think-
point, if it's a
Right,
health
it's
or
criminal,
safe-
civil, yeah.
The case was
I'm-
civil, but I believe that this is
Right.
violence in
Yeah,
the most basic form. Like, until
Yeah.
we have safe, secure housing, there is no way that we can
right,
meaningfully contribute to our
Mhm.
community or have meaningful
Right.
work or feel safe.
well, and if he was taking money that didn't go into there's potential
I
fraud.
think that's
that-
fraud,
Oh,
isn't it? Yeah.
And
took
there's
FEMA
lots of
money
people
and
still playing,
Yeah,
yes, there's still people paying rent as well.
okay,
To him,
Yeah.
not putting it in.
Yeah, I've gone around and written letters and let people know what their rights are and what they should do, but, you know, some
You don't
people are
wanna
scared,
risk,
they
you
don't
don't wanna
understand.
risk losing it, because there's nothing else.
right,
Correct.
right,
So we're at this point where the flood happened and things are bad, you know, not only did the water pump fail, the pipes are going to freeze 100%. And 2 Februarys ago, one of the sewer lines exploded in the basement. There was just raw sewage everywhere, and raw sewage has come up into apartments' showers and up through their drains. It's a huge sanitary issue. I mentioned there's rats everywhere.
yeah,
And this is in a village. This is in Moortown Village, and everyone can see it.
right,
Everyone sees it.
right.
And this has been going on for decades.
I have lots of questions.
Yeah.
I'm, first of all, I'm extremely sorry that this has been your experience of Vermont. And I'm sorry to the tenants that live with you, and, you know, thank you for doing your best to represent people who have less wherewithal and less of a voice. So thank you for being here. You know, we heard there was like someone reaching out to someone to reach out to you, so I'm really glad we have this testimony. It probably is one of the more extreme examples of how awful our housing market is. And here you are, librarians, postal workers, you know, really trying to serve the town.
Well, one of the things though
Yeah.
that's important is that if this is a microcosm of how the landlord-tenant law from that side is working, that's the message. It would be very helpful if you could write the committee a brief letter, and again, you don't need to go into infinitesimal level of detail, just outlining the issues you've raised with us, one. And two, tell us who you've been working with at Vermont Legal Aid, the name of the health officer involved that you contacted, anybody else that you contacted, pointing out the issue and the help that you sought. I think it is worth our while to go to the next step and to begin asking some questions, particularly looking at how the legal system has dealt with your issue. And that's the thing we also should perhaps have a chat with our colleagues on the judiciary.
I was
committee.
thinking that as
Yeah.
well. I will say there's something called otter.ai, and you can take a Zoom and it'll transliterate it for you.
Okay.
So it's actually very accurate. And if you need help, we can make sure that we don't put a big additional burden on you, and we can do that first
Thank
pass
you.
at it. Yeah.
Yeah, but the key in terms of what you write out, and we don't need anything elaborate, but just enough of the factual
Yeah.
information, one, and two, the identification of people that we should talk with for the next step, we or the judicial committee, depending on how this gets
Right.
divided up. But I don't think we should let this ride.
No, I mean,
This would be
Yeah.
testimony we should hear at our joint hearing, because
Yes.
this is what happens when there's no alternative housing.
Exactly. That I was thinking the same
You
thing.
can't.
I'm not presuming.
You're stuck in
Yeah.
an unsanitary, unsafe position
Mm-hmm.
with a landlord who just might turn off your heat or your electricity tomorrow.
Right.
And you're between a rock and a hard place. There's no place for you to go. You can't just walk away and say, forget it, I'm gonna rent something
and our
else.
limited resources are being
Right.
drained. Like, this is our
Oh,
time,
yeah.
our energy, our
Right.
sanity, and the fact that we're expected to go work and make these rents, that
Yeah.
the burden is being put on
Mhm.
On you.
disproportionate shoulders,
Is
yeah.
everyone withholding their rent?
No.
Does- Yeah. Does the town feel any responsibility for helping you all move somewhere else in the community? If we're talking about fabricating multifamily modular housing, this is possible now to stand things up if they found space.
So there's many different things happening.
Mhm.
I know that there are individuals, like the health officer who's been incredibly helpful,
Mm-hmm.
yet I think because of recent legislation, he no longer has a lot of power. Like, he can't condemn
He
anything.
doesn't.
It's the fire marshal now.
Oh, right.
And the fire marshal, I believe, is to a degree in cahoots with the landlord and because they'll have private talks and nothing happens.
Yeah, we should be
Our
talking.
fire marshal.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So
Oh, I don't know if it's.
And we did that because town health officers were, whoever was the last guy in the totem pole that got assigned, they were frequently untrained, didn't know what was going on. But the fire marshals are supposed to be trained professionals.
Correct.
And so they're not doing anything
Yeah.
here. They're our responsibility.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, because this is an open case, the fire marshal does not want to get involved. They would have to start from the beginning. And to be honest, the fire marshal, they are not engaged at all. They just go around, they say, okay, is that a window, is that a stair? Or, there's no personal
Wow.
investment in understanding this holistic.
Which usually fire
Issue.
marshals are very
It's like a
passionate
check
about
mark.
life safety.
Right.
There's an instance where they like, oh, we need a railing on these stairs. Like, that's what they're focused on. They weren't looking at this systemic thing. And the handyman just put in like 2 stakes and threw a screw through it, and he goes, okay, check, there's a hand or a railing. Like, it's not,
Right.
they don't have time
Yeah.
or
Right.
interest in really.
If the pipes freeze and there's no water, you can't put out a fire.
That's true too.
I mean,
Yeah, and the person who doesn't have hot water, I mean, hot water is a basic.
It's been 5 years that
That's-
woman has not had, and so that's a whole different issue. This landlord, this building, the electrical is all messed up, and she was getting bills in like the fall for like $400 a month, and this woman was like, something's wrong, I can't afford this, and the landlord was like unresponsive, so her bills racked up. That went to collections, and she hasn't been able to get it turned back on since. And she is definitely a vulnerable person in our society and has a lot of
Right.
mental things that she's trying to overcome, and
Yeah.
she's pretty much bad person
Sounds like
at this point.
she and the landlord. It's a mess.
Well,
This is a mess.
he will not talk to women. He's very sexist. He'll insult us to our faces. he will only talk to men, and then completely ignore our existence. And if you talk to him, he's just accused, like right off the gate, he starts accusing you of things. It's very manipulative, and he has a lot of gaslighting, and there's a lot of tactics involved with how he
So it's,
speaks to us.
where is the net here? Where's the safety net? If it isn't the Department of Health, I mean, it just sounds like you're falling through every safety net we have. And
But they don't have another market option.
That's it.
Like,
No,
I
I
guess
get
the
that you're
net
worried.
ends when you're like, why would I pay this man
Yeah.
money?
Yeah.
But there's nowhere else for them to live, and that's
Not
when
even
everybody
his
else
house.
Yeah,
needs
that's
to
the
hear.
ultimate thing. I'll stop paying you, I'll move somewhere else.
Right.
But there's nowhere else.
There's no enforcement either. So the thing is, if we're gonna allow people, individuals, to house other people
Yeah,
without any responsibility,
right,
that's an issue, especially as things get tighter. And
Right.
like you said, they don't have to do anything.
yeah.
People are desperate.
Well, I mean, I think some people would say there's heavy enforcement in their community, and, you know, that seems to catch the people doing the right thing. This clearly, I don't know if Legal Aid has said, like, this is unique in any way, or,
They just said there's nothing that they can really do about it. Like, all you can do is sue him.
okay.
And that would
Yeah.
require me to have tens of thousands of dollars to pay a
Right.
lawyer or represent myself.
Right, because Burlington's its own animal, but they basically said to a landlord, if you lose your license to rent until you move people out, pay for where they're going to live and fix it. So, like,
But I don't-
this person shouldn't be licensed to
They should-
rent
are
to
they
people. while this is
licensed?
happening.
I honestly don't even know anymore. And
Right.
Well,
Well,
Exactly.
we have,
He doesn't even pay taxes.
they probably
Yeah,
don't have
most
licenses.
places
don't have
Yeah,
licenses.
that's
But
like you have to rent in Burlington.
Actually have a
Usually,
statute.
you won't pay them until like the
Okay.
last
Okay.
minute. And
He
it's
knows how to play the
For
game.
what?
Your
absolutely-
water is off for 2 days.
Requiring a landlord
But
to.
then he comes back.
It's a bill.
and
But it
says,
exists
"I don't
already.
have
Yeah,
any
it's a
water."
bill.
I just- But you
Well,
never
it's
know
existing law.
what's going to be
Yes,
next.
yeah.
And he doesn't,
the underlying bit.
the water
Yeah.
isn't off permanently.
Mhm.
Electricity isn't off permanently. It's just off long enough to really be an annoyance and an insecurity to you. You never.
Yeah, we couldn't shower, wash our hands. We couldn't go to the bathroom for 4 days.
So what, this is a consumer protection issue. It strikes me that the Attorney
I
General,
was gonna
I
say, the
reached
attorney,
out
you need a
to the
lawyer.
attorney.
and-
Yeah,
I think you need consumer protection.
You reached out to the attorney general and he said they can't.
Well, I didn't really understand how to reach out to them. I like submitted a request.
Okay.
And then they got back to
State's
me with like a
attorney.
fee or something.
Oh.
To like look in,
think
like
the
I was just
state's
asking about information
Okay.
on him. Maybe I didn't do it right. I mean, that was.
Okay. Well, you have the roughest, toughest senator, you know, now who knows your constituent, and she has a lot of help.
State's
I'm
attorney.
thinking the state's attorney
Yeah.
would be.
Yeah.
But it also sounds like there's holes in the law and he knows every one of them to get through. He pays his taxes but he doesn't pay them until 2 days after. But they usually make it pretty expensive for you to.
I don't know. And I mean, the fact that he's racked up all these fines and hasn't paid a dime or made any.
Why haven't they just shut him down?
Well, I think that's that's why we wrote all this into the court orders, because if you
Yeah.
shut him down, there's 7 people
Right.
who are on.
Well, there might be more. I mean, if he
Oh.
owns other properties.
Yeah.
A lot of them
yeah,
are empty now, but there are still a few people living in them.
Wow.
And you know, they're just keeping quiet. They're just
Yeah.
living in those conditions, and ours are just so bad.
Because this is what the housing market is doing to people.
Yes.
And I understand the
Mhm.
need and want to build new units, but like they are potentially viable.
Yeah.
Right,
units.
right.
Sounds
Yeah.
like this could be
Yeah.
And
renovated.
we've got funds
Right.
out there
Yeah.
to rehab.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
this particular one might be too far gone.
How about a
but-
buyer?
Right.
Is
Rental
it too
buyer.
far gone? Or
This
this
one
one
might
might
be.
be. This one might be.
How about
Okay.
And
Capstone
it's in
buying it?
flood, you know, might
So,
be
well,
a
that's what I
hazard
actually
mitigation.
got intrigued by this. So the two options
buyer,
are
that is.
either getting the court to trigger the fines, finding us relief, and just moving on, getting everybody out in safe housing,
Yeah.
or
Right,
some
so
sort of
you have the money
assistance
to move.
afford the
Right.
housing that is
Yes.
available,
Yeah.
or find a receiver and get a receivership going.
Yes.
However, the lawyer on the case is just like, I can't find one. No one wants to do it. So I don't know if he's, you know,
Yeah.
a receiver is just anyone that can sort of just make decisions, can apply for grants.
Right.
can Tell these people you gotta go, here's
Mhm.
some money, you know, like as long as this man is in control, it's not gonna go anywhere.
Somebody
The
buy it.
receivership is an interesting concept.
Right, but if the town
This is what
wants to
doesn't
do
work far
something,
enough.
well,
It
if,
doesn't,
if,
well, it doesn't make make the victims whole in any way, shape, or form. It causes the repair, but
Right.
It pays for the repair,
It pays
right,
for the
so that's
repair.
part of it.
And it would
So-
pay for our relocation because we went through
Right.
that step of putting it into
Right.
Right.
order.
And so I think
But
we
paying
know,
for
like,
the repair
I think
is a good
I think
start.
these remedies exist on paper, and short of having, you know, a very competent lawyer in the public interest, you know, being willing to take this on,
There's gotta be a.
there's not an existing remedy at the end of this line.
I think towns don't know about
I know,
this,
and maybe we
and they're
can
not
call it,
willing
yeah.
to use them.
Right.
But we should at least look at what
Like,
we do
like
have in Reading.
I know the city of Montpelier.
No,
Yes,
but what,
yeah,
I see repossessed.
what this would allow
Yeah.
is that the town, there is already some extent, or some, authority. The town, after finding it, and it would be a health inspector, municipal building inspector, or fire marshal, once they find that the place is, uninhabitable or has other issues, I was focusing on lead in this bill, because that happens.
Yeah,
Then the town could go in and actually make those improvements. So the town would pay for someone to make those improvements and then put a lien on the property that the owner would have to pay at some
right,
point.
so I think our
So-
town just isn't equipped. to do
Well,
that.
and I think this still goes back to this flood situation that
Well, they would hire
even if you
somebody
could
to
fix
do it.
this building up, it probably shouldn't be fixed up and given
Right,
to
so
someone
that's
else.
why I was asking.
So,
Right.
this
Well,
reminds
it's a
me
secret
of
ship.
the
Might
Waterbury
be a better
article.
way to approach it, I think.
But I'm,
Maybe.
so, that may be,
Multiple
but
options,
here's what I wanna say that feels like the state's responsibility. When I read about the Waterbury situation where the family basically said, no, we just don't wanna turn some of our acreage into a floodplain.
Oh.
So that the town could, so thinking about what happened in that situation, the state had tools that it didn't use.
Correct.
Okay.
It had eminent
Right, and I'm not gonna go into the details of that specific case, but the state ultimately has eminent domain power. And this seems like the time to get the Attorney General to say, should we
The
use
public
it?
thing, the towns, at least the city, because I know in my time, the city of Montpelier put a furnace in. It was a dilapidated house, an elderly woman. I think they had a hose running from the house next door. They put a furnace in and there was a lien on the property. We had a guy out near us
Okay.
that just threw his trash over the bank on Route 12. So it was just all trash bags and rats because my son refused to deliver newspapers up there after being attacked by a rat. The town cleaned it out and put a lien on the house. So at least if it's health and safety, those, you know, furnaces, towns, but you get to small towns, does Moortown have any kind of a town manager?
Or a city attorney, a town.
Everybody,
attorney.
every
Yeah,
town
a
has
town
an attorney.
clerk.
Who's
Yeah,
that?
everybody has a clerk.
The attorney is Ron Chens, I believe.
Yes, we know Ron well.
Oh,
Yeah,
his wife was here.
yeah.
No,
Maxine.
Ron, I sold his house.
And what is
Yeah.
Ron suggesting? Is he offered to work
Active,
pro
he
bono on
was-
this?
I don't know how they worked that out, but I
Mhm.
know that he was, you know, he really worked with us to get that court order written the way it is, so
Mhm.
that there was legal action, but now it's sort of sat there for a year, we were supposed to find a receiver.
I would think the town could
Oh,
sue
they're
him
really
at this point.
Or
So
just
have you met
go
again
in
with
and
Ron?
do
It sounds like he should
I mean,
be
you
together.
get legal
I've
stuff
been-
too.
Yeah.
Reaching out to him, he hasn't been very responsive. So I went to a select board meeting Tuesday evening and went into executive session with them, and I think ultimately they're like, okay, we need to reach out to Ron and sort of get these fines
Okay.
triggered. And so I think that is the next step, that they're
Okay.
sort of trying to
Yeah.
engage him again and
They're
get something
paying
done.
Ron for his time as town's attorney, so he's gonna have them tell him what they'll pay him to do. He's not working
Right, but-
for every citizen in town, he's working for the
Right.
town government.
But he
Exactly.
also might help you find a pro bono lawyer,
That would be great.
because Ron's
I've-
network is
Yeah,
extensive.
yeah.
So back when I was looking for lawyers, when I was considering suing the landlord, because I was told that was my only avenue, I went to the extent of legal aid to the point where like, we can't help you anymore, and then they sent me to the bar. And I probably called 15, 20 different lawyers and got turned away with by all of them.
Wow.
No one was willing to
Where's
accept it, or there was a
the
conflict of
Association for
interest, or they didn't
Justice?
do real estate.
Yeah.
All lawyers.
Okay.
I made it to
Serrano.
the end of that, and I've
Yeah.
been, calling legal aid for information and asking questions, because I was pretty much ready to just represent myself, but I'm just not there yet or
Yeah,
ready.
okay.
Sure.
And letting this sort of
I'm
just
gonna
all
talk to the
unfold.
lobbyists for the Association for Justice.
Yeah,
And the trial lawyers.
seriously.
That's the trial lawyers.
Yeah.
And let's see if we can't, and if you can give me your contact.
Yeah, of course.
Come to the right people.
Yeah.
You know, we're not gonna let this go.
Yeah, this is horrible.
Yeah.
How to do
Well,
it.
this-
It's far from isolated.
You shouldn't have to
Unacceptable.
come here to the state senate to get this resolved, but you are here and we're going to see what remedies we can
We can
sort
figure
out. In the meantime, honestly, if there's a GoFundMe, like I would share it. I mean,
Not
really, it
yet.
sounds like you
Yeah.
have people who are really ill and need help.
Yeah, my neighbor, I'm very concerned for her. and-
Yeah.
With no heat, no hot water.
No, and I've referred her to Capstone many times. I
Yeah.
think she's called them and sort of hit dead ends with them too. And,
Okay.
That's,
you know, she's her own person and making her
Right.
own choices, but I've tried to help her.
Yeah.
And you have a
sometimes
family with
people, it's
kids.
hard to help.
There's a family with children, part-time kids,
Doesn't
kids,
matter.
right, and so recently, the son's bedroom ceiling sort of fell open
Oh,
with
great.
water damage, and that's still gaping, it's not fixed yet, so
That's traumatizing for a child.
it's just not a safe environment.
Right.
It's the past 2 years, it has deteriorated
Right.
significantly.
And we like to think this isn't happening in the US or Vermont,
Oh.
you know, so like, it's really, really devastating that it had to come all the way here.
Yeah.
And it's not even
And-
over, but we'll
but-
try to resolve it.
Before this, the ultimate solution is the town or the
I
state,
know,
somebody
yeah.
would condemn the building and
Yes,
just.
Right.
And turn it into
But
a
now
floodplain.
with the housing shortage.
Yeah, people
If
wanna
you
live
do that,
in this, because
you've
otherwise they
got-
get homeless.
You've got people that
Yeah.
are gonna
Yep.
end up in our
Right.
motel program.
Right.
It's full, by the way,
Well,
like,
yeah.
there's no.
No, we're not
Yeah.
taking it anymore.
Another thing to consider about condemning buildings or even evictions is the cost that it requires for these people to move.
Mm-hmm,
Like, if there's nowhere to go, where do all our belongings go? Do you have
Yeah.
to pay for storage units? There's none of those
Yeah.
either.
Right,
And, you know, taking work off, the emotional
Yeah.
toll, like, these are
Yeah.
all costs. And we are living in a time of extreme inflation, you know, low wages. We do not have the bandwidth to
Right.
deal with this.
Right.
And there's just no relief
yeah.
in any sense.
In a big picture sense, this is absolutely the result of the lowest vacancy we've ever had in the state. And we need to, as an entire legislature, acknowledge what this low of vacancy does. It's dangerous.
Yep.
Especially coupled with low wages.
Yes,
Yeah.
right.
Low wages and sort of lousy landlords.
And supply and demand.
Yes.
There's
It's
a lot of
enabling.
demand and no supply, so the
Yes.
rents
Yeah.
are up
This person can
even
get away
on
with it.
the really bad units.
Right,
Right.
and we need to empower the towns, because
Right.
there are some things that the towns can do, and we need to
If
help
they,
them do
if they
that.
want to.
It sounds like this town does want to do something, they
And
do.
Moretown is a
I
well-heeled
think
town. This is there's no excuse for
I've
Moretown.
made them aware of it. I think they
Okay.
would like to ignore it, as they
Oh.
have for the past
Mm.
few
Okay.
decades.
Mm.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
right in the
message.
village.
Yeah.
This is
Everyone
message.
knows. Everyone
Right.
on a personal level knows what's
Right.
happening there. Everyone's
Yeah.
lived there. This is like the apartment building that everyone has lived in.
Oh,
gosh.
And it's just,
Everyone knows.
That their
Life
librarian,
cycle.
is, you know, like that
It
their
shouldn't even
civil
matter
servant.
who
They're
runs it.
Madam
Right, but they
Marion.
should, like,
Yeah.
that's really, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Yeah, of
you.
course.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank whoever kind of brought
Yeah.
this change.
This-
Please do send that letter to us with that information so that we can follow up.
Great. I'll send a letter. I'll share info. What's the best way
Do
for
we-
an email?
Magali, did you email each other?
Oh, yes,
Okay.
yeah, so I can.
So,
okay, and
yeah,
our
and I'll help
emails
her
are
with
all
the
the same. It's the first
transcription.
initial, last name at leg.state.bt.us. You
I won't
get-
remember that, but I'll.
Well,
it's
Magali will make
Magali
sure
will-
that we're like,
Magali will
yeah.
send it to you. She's
Okay.
got the same ending.
Well, on ending note,
Ending
I
note.
have been working with a few people to try and get a housing coalition started in town. So
Okay.
ideally, we do a housing trust
Yes.
and open up the opportunity. So if we gain receivership or some sort of control over this particular property or the others like it,
Mm-hmm.
or we would have an opportunity as community members or coalition to explore other sort of housing
Yes,
things. That isn't
Yeah.
some sort of like multi-unit thing, like,
okay,
if this is a village, we wanna
Yeah.
experiment with
And it is,
smaller.
yep, cottages
Yeah.
or,
it is
Yeah,
a village.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's got
right,
the Gulf on one side with
Yeah.
the Mad River, but then you've got a brook that goes around
Yeah,
that
Right.
regularly, it flooded the school. And
Yeah.
it's like,
exactly,
Oh,
which is
I'm-
a whole other issue.
Yeah.
Um,
right,
But then, I don't know, like, if there is this opportunity for middle people, like, not huge developers
Yeah.
and not private
Well,
landlords,
you
but
have an
community
affordable
groups
housing
that are coming together to try,
developer.
like, you know, where the
It's
valley
the
has
missing middle.
builders and architects and people
Right.
with energy that
You have
wanna try to-
resources. It's a well-heeled community. Deborah, thank you for bringing this forward to us. We are so grateful because this came from your email to all of us. And thank you.
We know those folks who can help you with
That'd be
a
great.
plan around housing and what's needed. We're gonna ask a lot of people to watch this segment.
Okay, great.
And
Thanks.
Of
Yes.
course,
a
thank you.
lot of
We-
systems
thank
have
you.
failed you and these folks, and we're very sorry for that. And we're really grateful you're telling us.
Great, I
Thanks.
appreciate all your
And we're
time.
Yeah.
grateful to Deborah for,
Yes, thank you, Deb, so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
this was good.
Yeah.
Thank you
Great.
very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be in touch.
Seriously, I wanna like Venmo you or